Good evening. I just asked Roddy what I called a daft question, and I said to him, when were you born? And he says 1970. The reason I asked him that was, you see, I started to do local history in the 1960s, before Roddy was. At school, those of you who would be my age, ilk, whatever, would probably remember doing history at school. You never did any local history, did you? It never was mentioned. When you did Irish history, there was always, you did the Land Acts to see how they affected Gladstone in England. You did the Home Rule to see how it affected Gladstone in England. I never did any Irish history as Irish history, even at, well, I suppose I did. I did it at Queen's. Yeah, I did it when I went to university. But I never did any local history, even at university. I suppose I did it, but I didn't realise I was doing it, because I studied actually under Eston Evans and Ken Connell. And Ken Connell was economic history, and Eston Evans was geography, as you know. And I suppose I was doing historical geography, and I didn't realise I was actually doing local history. And it was there where I began. But all the points that I want to make have already been made, so I'll just try and add a little bit to it here. I many years ago, would always have started off looking at the townland, and I was interested in what Roddy said there about the rebels. I was starting at the townland, not the family, right? But since I retired about 10 years ago, I now start with the family. So I've come sort of full circle, because family history, well, genealogy was there, but it wasn't really family history as I saw it then. Maybe genealogists would disagree with me here, but I mean, family history has developed out of genealogy and is much more than just simply genealogy. And certainly it helps you to understand an area much better. Raymond was quoting the marriage there. I could quote you one of a family. The man was called Samuel Long. He lived in a townland called Drummadreen. I don't know whether any of you are from Limavady or Dungiven, but Drummadreen is on the main road between Dungiven and Limavady. And he had a farm there. He married a daughter of the Reverend Geiler, and he had a farm in another townland called Ballymacallion, which is nearer Dungiven. So somehow or other, I think he managed to get that farm as well, but he still held on to the first one. So he was operating in two townlands. But when he was in Ballymacallion, across the stream or river, it wasn't a river, it was just a stream, there was another townland. I can't remember the name of it, but it doesn't really matter. But he had a farm there as well. But he never lived on it. He had a herd's house on it. You know what a herd's house is? It's like a bullying house, which is used every sort of summer, where someone will live in it in order to look after the cattle or the sheep or whatever animals he has up on the mountain. So he had three farms. He had quite a few daughters, so he decided, I think, he must have decided to move across the mountain to a place called Tullyrammer, which is between Achadui and Garba, if you're familiar with that part of the world. So he sold the three farms, and he ended up with a 70-acre farm, which was about the size of the three put together over there. And he went on to do other things. I mean, the point is that he was a man who was moving around quite a bit in different townlands. And in a way, for me, still the townland is the place where I begin, because I like to go to the townland and I like to talk to the people in it. Because first of all, I like to hear what they call it. Because they don't necessarily call it what you and I call it. And you may even find when you come up to the record office here and they ask you for such and such a place, they're using a local name, which isn't the official name. But yet, to use the records in PRONI, they need the official name. Another story is, this house we were looking at one day and we were trying to figure out something about it, and I said, it was in a clachan. You all know what a clachan is, a cluster of houses with all the fields around it. And they told me, well, it's in Aldegower. No, they told me it's in Ballytieram. So I came up to the record office, looked up the Ballytieram material, but couldn't find it. Then I looked at the adjoining townland, Aldegower, and it was actually in it. But the local people swore to me, it's not, it's in Ballytieram. And it was actually quite simple. They were using the stream as the boundary, which seemed the natural thing to do. But the official map men weren't using the stream as the boundary. They had an imaginary boundary. So there are little things like that. But I think that's, coming back to Roddy's point, I think that's where you begin to get people locally engaged in this. I mean, I used to talk to farmers and show them maps. And they understood them. They knew more about the maps than I did. And they knew exactly that that was 4 roods, or 2 acres, 4 roods, and 10 perches. And they knew it to the perch. And it was still there, after 100 years. So local history, I was looking at it for a more academic reason. I was getting a lot out of it as well. But we were chatting away about this, and they understood what I was saying, and I understood what they were saying, and I was probably using it a bit more. But that, to me, is one of the essence of local history, that you do engage with people. But there's a couple of points I want to finish on, which are slightly different from what the other two gentlemen were saying. One of them is that we now have a lot more material online, and I use it a lot. And it makes it, in some ways it makes it a bit easier, but in other ways it doesn't make it easy. But certainly all the material that Raymond has referred to, from the 1901-1911 census through the Griffiths revision books, through the Griffiths, right through to, if you happen to be in County Derry, the 1831 census, you have a vast amount of material, much of which is now online, in some place or other. And the best source of them all, in my opinion, is the 1901 and 1911 census, because that is a very good database. It's much, much better than the databases that you get on family history sites, which tend to only allow you to look at a limited amount of the database. Whereas these new ones, the 1901 and 1911 census, if you use the advanced searches on it, it's marvellous. You can find out all sorts of things. You could recreate the history of the structure of a street and the people living there. You can even put in and say, well, how many people in the area were actually born in America? Or you should sometimes look to see where all the various people in a particular district. It's usually a DED, or a district electoral division, and you'll see that Russia, India, all over the place, people who have returned home because they were born out there for a variety of reasons. There is another story. So, really, the thing about local history is that there are so many stories in it, and I agree entirely with what Raymond has just said about it being a story. I don't think of the history of a family. I actually think of the story of a family as well. It is a story. Okay, it's history, but it's more than history in a kind of way. So, I mean, you can either start with families, or you can start with townlands, or you can start... Actually, what you start with, the actual area you start with, depends on what it is you really want to investigate. I mean, if you want to look at markets and fairs and roads, you don't start with a townland. You start with maybe a barony or a parish or something like that. So it isn't straightforward. You don't just say, look, you always do it this way. You can do it that way or another way. At the end of the day, what you're trying to find out is you're trying to find out how people lived in that area at a particular time in the past, and how things changed and why they changed. One of the things that interests me most of all, why some families stay in an area and remain in an area, whereas other families completely disappear. What's the reason for it? And that requires you to look in great detail.
Attention, please. Documents cannot be ordered after 8 p.m.
See, I prevented you from getting documents. Anyway, just let me finish on that point, because I think that's about as much. We've talked enough about it tonight. We need to give you a chance, maybe, to get back at us and ask us questions. So, thank you very much.